Arya's father stood at the doorstep, his hands trembling as he stared at the letter in front of him. He knew this day would come, but he never thought it would be so soon. The weight of his debts had been crushing him for years, but now, the mysterious Lord of the Forest had made an offer. An offer he couldn't refuse. He crumpled the letter in his hands, tears of guilt swelling in his eyes. His mind raced through the consequences, but there was no escape. Later that evening, he called Arya into the room, his voice shaky, eyes avoiding her gaze. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. Arya, sensing the gravity of his tone, immediately felt unease crawling up her spine. Her father, usually strong and composed, seemed broken. "What is it, father?" she asked softly. The words seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds as he spoke. "You must marry him, Arya. To pay off our debts. The Lord of the Forest has agreed. He will forgive everything if you marry him." He couldn't bring himself to look at her as he uttered the words. Arya's world spun. "Marry him? But he's a monster. The villagers say he's something terrible," she stammered, her chest tightening. She had heard the rumors of the cursed lord, a beast who ruled the forest, a creature feared by all. Marry him? The thought made her stomach churn. "I have no choice," her father said, his voice breaking. "Please, Arya. It's the only way to save us." Torn between anger and sorrow, Arya stared at the man who had raised her, the man who was now asking her to sacrifice everything. She wanted to refuse, to run away, but she couldn't. She couldn't let her family fall into ruin. So, with a heavy heart, she agreed. The next morning, she set off on the journey to the mansion in the forest. The road was long, and the towering trees that lined the path seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with their silence. As she approached the mansion, her breath caught in her throat. The structure was enormous, ancient, and decayed, draped in shadows. It was like stepping into a nightmare, and yet she couldn't turn back. The doors creaked open on their own, as if the mansion itself had been waiting for her. Inside, the air was cold, thick with an eerie stillness. Every step echoed through the empty halls. She called out, but no answer came. It wasn't until she reached the grand staircase that she saw him. He stood at the top of the stairs, shrouded in darkness, his figure barely visible, but enough to send chills down her spine. His presence was overwhelming, and even though she could not see his face, she could feel his gaze burning into her. "I am the lord of this mansion," his voice boomed, deep and resonant, with a hint of sadness that surprised her. "You are here to fulfill the bargain. Your life is now bound to mine." Arya swallowed her fear and nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand." Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone once again in the cavernous mansion. She would soon realize that her life was no longer her own. The weight of the curse had already begun to wrap itself around her like invisible chains. As the days passed, Arya explored the mansion, each room more mysterious and unsettling than the last. She found herself constantly being watched by the eyes of paintings, the whispers in the walls seeming to follow her every step. The mansion itself seemed alive, a prison of darkness and secrets. She could feel it, there was something more behind this cursed place, something far deeper than the villagers' tales of a beastly lord. The truth was hidden, but she couldn't yet see it. The loneliness gnawed at her, the silence of the mansion an oppressive force she couldn't escape. Though she hadn't yet seen his face, the presence of the beast was always there, hovering just out of sight, as if waiting for something. Something she couldn't yet understand. One evening, as she sat by the fire in one of the vast rooms, she heard him approach. His steps were heavy, deliberate. He stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "You should not be afraid," he said, his voice softer than before. Arya looked up at him, her heart pounding, unsure if he was trying to comfort her or if it was just another part of the curse's torment. She remained silent, not knowing how to respond. "I am not what you think I am," he continued, almost to himself. "But you will come to know that in time." Arya wasn't sure what he meant, but something in his tone, something in the way he spoke, stirred a strange sense of sympathy in her. She had come here fearing a monster, but now, in these small, quiet moments, she began to wonder if perhaps there was more to him than the terrifying rumors. Could a heart lie beneath the beast? The air in the mansion shifted, becoming thicker, heavier with something unspoken. As the fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls, Arya couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. The beginning of something far darker and more complicated than she had ever imagined. Days turned into weeks, and despite the foreboding atmosphere of the mansion, Arya grew more accustomed to her surroundings. The beast, though distant, was no longer the terrifying figure she had initially feared. His presence was always near, watching from the shadows, but he never harmed her. Instead, he seemed to keep a careful distance, as if protecting her from something unseen. Every evening, they would sit in the dimly lit dining hall. The beast would eat in silence, and Arya, though still unsure of him, began to observe him closely. He moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural for someone of his size. His voice, though deep and rumbling, had a sadness to it that tugged at her curiosity. She wondered how much of the stories she had heard about him were true. Was he truly the monster they said he was, or was there something more? One evening, as they sat in silence once again, Arya finally gathered the courage to speak. "How long have you lived like this?" she asked softly, breaking the stillness. The beast paused, as if surprised by her question. He looked at her, his eyes gleaming from beneath the shadow of his hood. "Longer than you can imagine," he replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I was not always this way." Arya's curiosity grew. "What happened to you?" For a moment, he said nothing, as if weighing whether or not to share the truth with her. Finally, he spoke, his words slow and deliberate. "I was cursed, many years ago. For my arrogance, my cruelty. The curse was meant to make me suffer, to trap me in this form until I could learn to love, and be loved in return." Arya's breath caught in her throat. She had heard tales of curses, but never something so tragic, so personal. "Is that why you live here, alone?" The beast nodded. "No one dares to come near. I am a monster in their eyes. And perhaps, they are right to fear me." Arya could feel the weight of his words, the deep loneliness that he had carried for so long. And yet, despite everything, she didn't feel afraid. She felt pity, sympathy, and something else she couldn't quite define. "You don't seem like a monster to me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The beast didn't respond, but she could sense a shift in him, a softening in the way he held himself. It was as if her words had reached a part of him that had long been buried beneath the curse. Over the next few days, they spoke more frequently. The beast began to reveal small pieces of his past, of the man he once was. Arya listened carefully, her heart growing heavier with each story. He had been selfish, yes, but he had also been human, capable of kindness, of love, before the curse twisted his life into something unrecognizable. Arya found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. The villagers had painted him as a monster, a creature to be feared and hated, but here, in the quiet moments they shared, she saw glimpses of the man behind the curse. He was broken, yes, but there was a vulnerability in him that made her feel connected to him in a way she had never expected. One evening, as they sat together near the fire, the beast asked her a question that caught her off guard. "Do you regret coming here?" Arya looked at him, surprised by the question. She had never considered it before, not in this way. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I miss my family, my old life, but I don't regret getting to know you." The beast seemed taken aback by her answer. He had expected her to say yes, to confirm that she hated him, hated being trapped in this cursed mansion. But her response was different, unexpected. And it stirred something deep inside him, something he had long since buried. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, his voice strained. "I never wanted this for you." Arya felt a pang of sadness at his words. "It's not your fault," she replied softly. "You didn't choose this." He looked at her then, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it nearly took her breath away. "I didn't choose this, but I made choices that led me here. Choices I regret every day." They sat in silence for a long time after that, the fire crackling softly in the background. Arya's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. She had come here fearing a monster, but now she wasn't sure what she felt. The mansion, too, seemed to change with each passing day. It no longer felt as menacing, though its secrets still loomed in the shadows. Arya had begun to explore more of its rooms, uncovering strange, forgotten artifacts and dusty old books that hinted at the mansion's long, cursed history. There was one room, however, that remained locked. A room the beast had forbidden her from entering. The locked room gnawed at her curiosity. What was inside? Why was it off limits? But she didn't dare ask him, afraid of what the answer might be. Despite everything, Arya couldn't deny that she was beginning to feel something for the beast. It was not love, at least, not yet. But it was something. A connection, a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. And as much as she tried to push the feeling away, it lingered, whispering in the back of her mind. One night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized that she had stopped seeing the beast as just a creature cursed by magic. He was more than that, more than the stories told by the villagers. He was a man trapped by his past, by his mistakes, and by forces beyond his control. And slowly, against her better judgment, Arya felt herself slipping further into the darkness of the mansion's secrets, drawn deeper into the mystery of the curse and the man who had once been its victim. The connection between Arya and the beast deepened with each passing day, though neither of them openly acknowledged it. They had developed an unspoken routine, one that brought them closer in ways that felt dangerous. It was forbidden, she knew that much. A love between them could never be. He was a cursed being, and she was meant to fulfill a bargain, nothing more. Yet, the more time they spent together, the harder it became to deny the pull she felt toward him. Arya found herself drawn to the parts of him that weren't monstrous. His voice, though gruff, had a strange comfort to it. His presence, though intimidating, made her feel safe in a way she hadn't expected. There was a tenderness hidden beneath the layers of his curse, and she could see it, even if he couldn't. One evening, they sat together in the mansion's library. It had become a quiet place where they could talk without the weight of the curse pressing down on them. Arya asked him about the locked room again, though she knew it was forbidden. "Why can't I see it?" she asked softly, her eyes searching his. The beast stiffened, the warmth that had settled between them fading quickly. "It's not for you to know," he said firmly, his voice colder than before. "There are things in this place that should remain hidden." Arya wanted to push further, to ask why, but something in his tone told her to leave it alone. Still, the question lingered. What was he hiding from her? What could be so terrible that even after all they had shared, he couldn't trust her with the truth? As their conversations continued, Arya felt the walls between them slowly crumble. The beast began to reveal more about his past, the life he once lived before the curse. He had been a man of power and wealth, arrogant in his pursuits, careless with the hearts of others. It was his cruelty that had led to his downfall, and now, he was paying the price. "You think you know me," he said one night, his voice heavy with regret. "But the man I once was, he deserved this curse. I am not someone worth saving." Arya shook her head, disagreeing. "No one deserves to be condemned forever for their mistakes," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We all have darkness in us, but that doesn't mean we can't change." The beast looked at her then, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, a vulnerability that made her heart ache. "You don't know what I've done," he whispered, as if confessing to something too terrible to speak aloud. Arya reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his clawed ones. "Then show me," she said. "Let me understand." But he pulled away, retreating back into himself. The moment passed, and Arya knew that the secrets of the locked room were tied to whatever darkness he was hiding. Still, despite the barriers he placed between them, her feelings for him continued to grow. It was wrong, she knew it was. She wasn't supposed to love him. She was supposed to fulfill the bargain and leave. But something in her heart refused to let go. One night, as the fire burned low in the hearth, they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Arya felt the tension rising, the pull between them growing stronger. She had fought it for so long, But now, sitting next to him, she couldn't deny it any longer. Without thinking, she leaned closer, her heart racing. The beast tensed, as if sensing what was about to happen, but he didn't move away. Slowly, hesitantly, Arya pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, a fleeting moment of connection, but it was enough to shatter the walls they had both built around themselves. When she pulled back, the beast's eyes were wide, filled with shock and something else, something deeper. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with the enormity of what she had just done. I'm sorry, she stammered, feeling suddenly unsure of herself. But the beast didn't respond. He stood abruptly, turning away from her, his body tense. You shouldn't have done that, he said, his voice strained. You don't understand what you've just done. Arya's stomach dropped, a wave of fear washing over her. What do you mean? The curse, he said, his voice filled with anguish. It's more powerful than you realize. Your feelings, they've triggered something. You're in danger now. Panic surged through Arya. She had known the curse was dangerous, but she hadn't realized that her love for him would make things worse. What kind of danger, she asked, her voice trembling. The beast didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving Arya alone in the flickering light of the fire, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. The next morning, Arya awoke to find the mansion colder than ever. The beast was nowhere to be found, and the servants, who had always been so attentive, had vanished. It was as if the entire mansion had fallen into a deep, unnatural sleep. Arya wandered the halls, calling out for the beast, but the only answer was the eerie silence that had settled over the place. Her thoughts kept returning to the kiss, to the way the beast had reacted. What had she done? Had her feelings truly triggered something in the curse? And if so, what would happen now? As she passed by the locked room, she stopped, her heart pounding. Something was calling to her from behind the door, something dark and powerful. She knew she wasn't supposed to enter, but the pull was too strong to resist. She had to know the truth. With trembling hands, she reached for the door handle, her mind racing with fear and anticipation. The moment her fingers touched the cold metal, the door swung open on its own, revealing a dark, shadowy room beyond. Arya stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat as she realized what she had just unlocked. The truth, the darkness, everything the beast had been hiding, it was all here, waiting for her. And there was no turning back. The room was colder than the rest of the mansion, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. Shadows danced across the walls, shifting in ways that made Arya's skin prickle. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and tarnished. It was unlike any mirror she had ever seen, dark and ominous, as if it had witnessed centuries of secrets. As she stepped closer, the mirror flickered to life. Images began to swirl across its surface, fragments of memories, glimpses of the past. Arya watched, entranced, as scenes unfolded before her. She saw a man, handsome, proud, and arrogant. It was the beast before his curse, but he looked nothing like the creature she had come to know. This man was powerful, feared by all around him. He ruled with cruelty, caring for nothing and no one but himself. The memories shifted, and Arya saw the moment that sealed his fate. A woman stood before him, beautiful and mysterious. She had come to him seeking mercy for her village, but he had refused. In his arrogance, he had mocked her, unaware of the danger she posed. The woman, a powerful sorceress, had cursed him, turning him into the beast that now haunted the mansion. You will learn what it means to live in the darkness, the sorceress had said. You will remain this way until someone loves you, despite the monster you've become. But be warned, the love must be pure, or the curse will consume you both. The images faded, and Arya stared at the mirror, her heart racing. She understood now. The curse wasn't just about the beast, it was about her, too. If she loved him, if she gave in to her feelings, they would both be trapped forever. The curse would bind them to the mansion, turning their love into a prison from which there was no escape. Arya's mind raced, piecing together everything that had happened. The kiss, the beast's warning, the mansion growing colder, it was all connected. Her love had triggered the curse's final act, and now they were running out of time. If she stayed, if she allowed herself to love him fully, they would both be lost. But how could she leave him now? After everything they had shared, after seeing the man behind the monster, how could she walk away? Arya felt torn, her heart pulling her in two directions. She wanted to save him, to break the curse, but she didn't know how. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the only way to break the curse was to let him go. Just as the weight of the decision pressed down on her, the door creaked open behind her. The beast stood in the doorway, his eyes filled with sorrow. He had known this day would come. He had always known that Arya would eventually discover the truth. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said softly, stepping into the room. "I tried to protect you." Arya shook her head, her voice trembling. "You can't protect me from this. The curse, it's too powerful." The beast nodded, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. "I know. And now you see why I never wanted you to love me. This curse, it's a trap. It was always meant to destroy anyone who dared to care for me." Tears welled up in Arya's eyes as the truth settled over her. She had thought she could save him, but now she realized that the only way to free him was to leave him behind. Her love wasn't enough to break the curse. In fact, it was the very thing that would bind them both forever. "I can't stay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If I do, we'll both be lost." The beast looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. "I don't want you to stay," he said. "I never wanted you to be trapped here. This is my punishment, not yours." Arya stepped closer to him, her heart aching. "But I don't want to leave you," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to walk away from you." The beast gently took her hand, his touch soft despite his monstrous form. "You have to," he said. "If you stay, the curse will only grow stronger. It will take everything from us." They stood there, both knowing what had to be done but neither wanting to say the words. Arya's heart broke at the thought of leaving him, of never seeing him again. But deep down, she knew he was right. The curse would consume them both if she didn't leave. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wish things could be different." The beast nodded, his expression filled with sorrow. "So do I." With a heavy heart, Arya turned and walked toward the door. Each step felt like a weight on her soul, but she knew it was the only way to save them both. The beast watched her go, his heart breaking with every step she took. He had wanted to believe that love could save him, but now he realized that some curses were too powerful to break. As Arya reached the threshold, she paused, her hand resting on the doorframe. She wanted to turn back, to run to him, but she knew she couldn't. With a final breath, she stepped through the door, leaving the beast and the mansion behind. The moment she crossed the threshold, the curse lifted. The cold that had gripped the mansion faded, and the shadows that had haunted its halls disappeared. The beast, now alone, felt the weight of the curse loosen its hold on him. He was free, but at a cost. Arya walked through the forest, tears streaming down her face. She had done the right thing, but it didn't make it any easier. She had loved him, and in the end, that love had saved them both, even if it meant they could never be together. As she disappeared into the trees, the mansion stood silent, its secrets buried once more. The curse was broken, but the price had been paid.